Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan, warmly joined today by Derek Brown and Pat Fitzmaurice. Fellows, we are talking fantasy takeaways for the NFC North. We have been running through all of the divisions. Hopefully, everybody has been enjoying the series or will enjoy the episodes to come. Not sure what order they're getting released. Today, we were talking about the NFC North, though, and it was the best division in football. One of the best divisions I can ever recall watching, particularly the top three teams, was remarkable how good they were and what their records were against non-NFC North opponents. So this will be a really fun episode to talk some takeaways about. Debro, we're going to start with you. You have the takeaway for the Detroit Lions, who are the 1 seed in the NFC. They went 15-2 this season.
This all comes down to we bought high on Sam Laporta in 2024, and in 2025, we get to buy low. He's going to drop in the ranks, and people are going to have where I draft him in the second or the third round. I'm not doing it again, because we know that that's how fantasy GMs work. Get burned once and never go back to the well. But I'm telling people they need to go back to the well, because I think this was a confluence of a lot of different things for Sam Laporta. One, I don't think he was fully healthy to start the year. Like, we're talking about a player that it wasn't until week 7 that we saw Sam Laporta play at least 90% of the snaps in the Detroit Lions offense. And all the other metrics are fantastic for Sam Laporta. The emergence of Jameson Williams also stunted his early season stuff. But if you look at weeks 13 through 18, we got pretty much the Sam Laporta we thought we were going to get. He was tight end 5 in fantasy points per game, 15 fantasy points per game, which if you look over the entire season, if he would have done that from the outset, guys, he would have been within shouting distance, like we talked about in other episodes, of being the tight end 1 overall and paying off on that draft price. So after the down year, all in for Sammy Ballgame for 2025, baby. Enjoy the discount.
Debro, Fitz and I, just talking on the Dynasty show, we were talking about Sam Laporta. Somebody asked us about trading him for the 109 in a Superflex rookie draft. And the Dynasty trade value chart has us relatively close. There was some other stuff going on in the trade that we don't need to get into the specifics, but that was kind of the main crux of it. I felt like I did not want to do that. Fitz saw it as a little more even. What do you think about that trade?
I'm not doing it because I think Laporta's value is higher than that, because at worst he's what? Dynasty tight end 3. I mean, he's in the conversation for tight end 1 overall still, I think with Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. But I wouldn't push back on it too hard, although I would want more than that. Like, if you could give me the 109 in like a second, I maybe would do it. But it also comes down to the fact that in Dynasty tight ends, they're much more valuable on your team than a lot of instances than you ever get back in trades. So
yeah, he I think, like I said, there were other pieces involved in that. It's a tier of 3 at the top, and I do think he is clearly the third in that tier. So maybe you could argue it's a tier of 2 at the top, and then kind of him on his own, a tier of 1 behind McBride and Bowers. But I do think he's very clearly in the top 3. Fitz, how do you look at Sam Laporta for 2025?
Tier of 1 behind Bowers and McBride. Likely 4th round pick. I think we're going to see one tight end go maybe in each of the first 4 rounds of the draft. Bowers, I think, is worthy of a late first. McBride a second, Kittle a third, Laporta in the 4th. And yeah, agree with Debro. Like, we saw more of the old Sam Laporta late in the year. I think another factor for the slow start was that the Lions were completely demolishing people early in the season and just running the ball down people's throats and like barely bothering to pass. There were some games where like Jared Goff had 17 or 18 pass attempts. So that played into it also. But yeah, I mean, like the Jameson Williams thing is maybe a problem that's not going away for Laporta. So I like him. I just don't think he has the ceiling that Bowers and McBride do.
Debra, the other thing I wanted to ask you about the Lions, and I talked a little bit about this with Fitz, is if Ben Johnson leaves for a head coaching job, which obviously for the third straight year, he's going to be really highly sought after. Mm-hmm. There's a very likely chance, I think, that this offense is not as at least well called next year and well designed. Like Ben Johnson is considered arguably the best offensive coordinator in football. I think many would say he is the best offensive coordinator in football, at least among the guys who aren't head coaches right now. So if they're taking a step back in that regard, it's not easy to just immediately get the next very obvious guy. We've seen Jared Goff struggle in some previous offenses before when he didn't have, this amazing setup around him. Is there any concern for you going into next year if we assume that Ben Johnson is not there anymore, that will negatively impact Laporta and really the offense as a whole?
I think it could hurt them as far as, are they a top 3 offense? But I don't see them falling outside of the top 5 in the sense of, let's just assume you don't get Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson doesn't stay, but you don't get a massive fall off. Like, you could still get an offensive coordinator because the infrastructure of this offense, it's not like there are other moving pieces and we're so worried about this entire thing falling apart. Like, the offensive line is still going to be elite. You still have 2 of the best running backs in the NFL. All of that structure and that floor that you built, that basement, that foundation of this team is all still firmly in place. This is basically just don't screw up the offensive coordinator hire, and you probably still have a top 5 offense in the NFL. So maybe it hurts some in the sense of, okay, Laporta, top 2, top 3, now we're bumping into top 5 tight end and splitting hairs in some of the positions like that. But am I worried? Not a ton, because I also know that Dan Campbell's involved in those offensive meetings and stuff. So it's not like they're going from, issues with that. And the other side of this too is, if they lose Aaron Glenn, what if the defense takes a step back and the offense is pushed even more next year? We could play that card too.
I have a lot of trust in Dan Campbell to make a good hire.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like somebody who will do a very good job of kind of vetting his available options, and B, he's the type of coach that I think quality offensive coordinator candidates will want to come coach under. So,
well, his background too, he's not a defensive guy. Like, he played tight end. He was an offensive guy. So it's not like we're even talking about like a CEO or a defensive minded head coach. I think it gets lost in the sauce that Dan Campbell also is more of the offensive minded guy too.
I think he's a CEO type now, if you had to put him in a bucket, but the background, yes, is like one, he is not just that. He is also contributing to offense and stuff like that. Minnesota Vikings 14-3. They are the 5 seed. Obviously, winning 14 games is typically enough to win the division. Not this year for the NFC North. Fitz, what's your takeaway for the Vikings?
That fading Minnesota pass catchers because of Sam Darnold was a mistake in 2024. And I think fading Minnesota pass catchers because of J.J. McCarthy in 2025 will also be a mistake. So Justin Jefferson fell into like the middle of the first round, sometimes even the late part of the first round this year in fantasy drafts, because people were nervous about Sam Darnold and him possibly undermining Jefferson's heroics. Like, there were some drafts where Jefferson fell to 110 and was going behind, he was consistently going behind Amon-Ra St. Brown in drafts that I was in, but I saw drafts where he was going behind A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson too, which I thought was kind of crazy. I wound up, because of that, getting Jefferson in a lot of spots where I was like sitting at 108, and I was obviously delighted with how things turned out. 1,500 yards, 103 catches, 10 touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, we are gearing up for a repeat of the same phenomenon, because I do think the Vikings are going to let Sam Darnold walk and make a go of it with their cheap first round pick quarterback. And look, I'm not as completely sold on J.J. McCarthy as Debro is, but he is good enough to make Justin Jefferson go. I mean, heck, I am good enough to make Justin Jefferson go, and I'm not sure how far I could throw a football out of my backyard. So, do not fade these pass catchers. Don't fade Jordan Addison or T.J. Hawkinson either because of the quarterback situation.
Fitzy, you're not getting yourself enough credit. I've seen the hose you've got. I've seen you chuck a football, okay? Just to say it.
I think that it's very easy to make the case for not fading Justin Jefferson, obviously. I think it's easy to make the case for not fading TJ Hawkinson. I think Addison is the one that people will make the case to fade. It's not often you see a rookie quarterback, which McCarthy essentially will be next year. It's not often you see a rookie quarterback support multiple viable pass catchers, let alone 3. If we're looping in Hawkinson there too, I really like Addison the player, and I like him as a number 2. I think it suits him really well to be a high level 2 rather than a low level 1 in an offense. He's the one that I think I'm anticipating people making the case to fade. What do you think, D-Bro?
Yeah, I mean, I faded him coming into this season, and Jordan Addison just shoved it in my face, man. And I mean, kudos to him. We've seen him grow as a route runner, as a target earner, at, not only that, but the strength of the catch point. Like, Addison has taken a big step forward this year, and I'll tip my cap to him, man. And to all the parts that Fitz laid out. I mean, I was telling people not in draft season, don't fade Justin Jefferson because I'm not that worried about it. And this all comes back to, like, look, regardless of whatever people's thoughts are about J.J. McCarthy as a prospect, whether you didn't like him, you were big on him, you were high on him, you loved him, this all comes back to Kevin O'Connell. And do we really think, like, how many iterations of this offense have we seen still go? Like, you have Josh Dobbs. We saw what that looked like. Pass catchers all still flourished. We saw with Nick Mullins, okay, he's throwing for 300 yards on a weekly basis. Now we've seen it with Sam Darnold. Why the heck don't people have, like, belief and give KOC credit? And even if you don't like JJ, unless you think he is just walking into the NFL and he's worse than Nick Mullins, he's worse than Josh Dobbs, he's way, way, way worse than Sam Darnold, he's not, then why do we not also have faith in this offense, this head coach, this offensive system to support the quarterback they felt good enough to take in the first round of the NFL draft?
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say thank you for mentioning O'Connell because I totally forgot to mention him. But, like, that's one of the big reasons. I mean, the infrastructure is so good. Not to mention, like, really, well, the tackles are great. They could maybe use some work on the interior of the offensive line, but, like, it's just a really good system for a young quarterback to enter and be able to thrive right away.
Where are you going to have Addison ranked, Fitz?
Probably in the 20s somewhere. I mean, I do think he is really good and could be a star elsewhere. Like, I think he's that good. But yeah, obviously you have to dock him a little bit for having to share balls with Justin Jefferson.
NFL playoffs. We're talking about NFL playoffs. You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the NFL playoffs. And the key to you scoring big is betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score 6. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. We've got an awesome looking slate for Wild Card Weekend. A couple of close games based on the spread. Also some intriguing projected blowouts. Ravens-Steelers is always fun, even with that spread at 9.5 early in the week. Broncos playing as well as anyone, despite being 8.5-point underdogs in Buffalo. The other games have smaller spreads. We get some super fun quarterback matchups. Herbert Stroud, Love Hurts, Baker, Jaden Daniels. Lines and odds are subject to change, but this Wild Card Weekend looks like a ton of fun. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it in the playoffs. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So score big during the NFL playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Fitz, let's go to your Green Bay Packers, 11-6 this season.
Yeah, I just talked up the Minnesota Vikings, and now I'm going to talk down about the Green Bay Packers. 2025 is off to a pretty weird start so far. The Packers have gone from seemingly flush at wide receiver to desperately needing help at that position. I thought the Packers were stacked with good young wide receiver talent coming into the season. Jaden Reed looked like a star in the making. Christian Watson had diagnosed the root of his hamstring issues and seemed ready to live up to his immense potential. Romeo Doubs had proven to be a solid contributor. Packers head coach Matt LaFleur was talking up Dontavian Wicks, even comparing him to Devontae Adams. Reed stopped producing midway through the season. I have no idea what his future is going to look like. Watson tore his ACL, and it's now starting to look like he might be another Denario Alexander. Worm, do you remember him? That might be
Yeah, I remember.
that might be too dated for you. He was this big playmaking receiver out of Missouri whose career was cut short by injuries. But big playmaker, but yeah, just kept getting one big injury after another.
Will Fuller's the contemporary comp for that.
Will Fuller, yes.
You might know that name, Worm.
Yes.
I was playing fantasy football when Denario Alexander was. I wasn't doing this professionally. I was playing, but yeah, I don't have a I was in college when he was. Actually, I was in high school when he came into the NFL.
Yeah.
So it's a while ago.
Yeah, that was just sort of the comp that came to mind for me, since Denario Alexander was 6'5", and Watson is a big rangy fellow too. But obviously his NFL future is in serious doubt now, unfortunately. Dontavian Wicks, pretty good at getting open, not so good at making contested catches or sometimes easy catches. I don't know. I mean, Devontae Adams also had that problem in his first couple of years in the league, and things worked out well for him. But we'll see on Wicks. Like, I think he's more of a number 3 or number 4 than a starter right now. And Romeo Doubs, just like a complimentary receiver, not a guy you want as your 1 or maybe even as your number 2. Suddenly the Packers have gone from being loaded at wide receiver to being pretty needy. And I mean, like, they have other needs too. Cornerback, maybe they could use another edge rusher, but they're going to have to draft at least one wide receiver, I think, this year.
Debro, how do you evaluate this receiving core for Green Bay, especially when it comes to fantasy?
Oh, man. The Watson news really hurts. Looking at the rest of this wide receiver room, I think it comes down to, and we've seen this in previous iteration, like previous weeks, where I forget who are they playing the last. It was the Minnesota Vikings. It was the Vikings. And Brian Flores dialed up their man coverage rate, and you saw all their guys struggle, and they didn't have Watson to beat man and have an answer for that. So I think looking at all the different skill sets of these wide receivers, that you're not only building a basketball team and you're trying to get a complement of different skill sets, but you also need you need a dude. Like, you need a guy that, like, well, okay, when it gets tough and I need somebody to go be the alpha and do alpha type things, the committee's all great and stuff until the committee ain't working, or you have certain weaker links in the armor. When it comes down to it, you need a guy when the chips are down, we can feed him targets and we can get production, and we know that production's going to be there. Green Bay needs an alpha.
Debro, let's stick with you for the takeaway for the Bears, who went 5-12 in Caleb Williams' rookie season.
I talked about it all draft season, and it was right. Fading DeAndre Swift in 2024 was the right call. If you look at his entire body of work, the first few weeks of the season, specifically that stretch between weeks 5 through 8, when he was RB2, RB6, RB11 in fantasy scoring on those weekly basis, that's really carrying a ton of water and propping him up to where he was RB21 in fantasy points per game overall. But if you look at when you needed DeAndre Swift the most, he fell on his face. Weeks 11 through 17, RB33 in fantasy points per game. He was RB28 as far as his weekly rate of finishing as an RB2 or better. So Swift is a player that, look, I think people still have clung to previous Detroit Lions hype and hope, and whether it's he hasn't been able to stay healthy at certain points. Now we finally get the health, and the effectiveness is just meh. So fading Swift was the right call last year, or in 2024. It's going to be the right call again in 2025.
Fitz, where did you have Swift in their rankings for this last season?
I was below consensus. I was not too high on him. And just generally, I don't want to be above consensus on DeAndre Swift, but his value was such a moving target, because remember how he just face planted out of the gates. The Bears offensive line was really struggling. Then he got hot and, was tearing it up for a few weeks. And then over the back half of the regular season, I feel like that was sort of the true DeAndre Swift value. If he's going to be in a featured role, he's not really a guy you want as your feature back. But in his defense, I will say that a lot of this was sort of largely the product of his environment. Bears offensive line, not great. And just not an offense that was sustaining a lot of drives, which kind of short-circuited Swift in that, he got probably fewer touches than he might have in a better performing offense. So, I don't think he was terrible, and I don't think he's anyone's, featured back of the future. I just think he's going to be, at this point in his career, he is probably best served as someone's full-time third down back.
Yeah, agreed.
Where do you anticipate him being in ECR for 2025?
Oh, man, probably in the late 20s, high-end RB3, mid-range RB3, something like that.
I think I'm probably going to be out at that price. I would expect.
I had him as an RB3 last year. I think he'll probably be ranked anywhere from low-end RB2 to high-end RB3, and I'll just happily avoid him like I did last year.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling the same. All right, we'll wrap up the NFC North there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Be sure to check out all of our other divisional takeaways with myself, Debro, and Fitz. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.